I sat across from Sophia at our apartment dining table while steam rose from untouched pasta between us. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Her phone lit up beside her plate again. Lucas Hayes. 3 calls in 10 minutes. Sophia quickly turned the screen face down. I stared at the movement quietly. "You're not answering?" I asked. She sighed heavily. "It's work. At 9:30 at night?" "Yes, Aaron. Some people actually have demanding jobs." Her sharp tone should have started another argument. Usually it did. Usually I defended my feelings while she accused me of overthinking everything. But that night felt different. I leaned back in my chair and watched her carefully. "Why does he call you more than I do now?" Sophia laughed without humor. "Seriously? I'm asking calmly. You're asking because you're insecure." There it is again. What? That word. I rubbed my forehead slowly. Every time I notice something uncomfortable, suddenly I'm insecure. She grabbed her wine glass. "Because you are." Her phone buzzed again. "Lucas Hayes." Sophia cursed under her breath. "Answer him," I said quietly. "No." "Why not?" "Because you'll start another fight." I looked at her for a long moment. "You already know how this looks." "Oh my God." She pushed her chair back slightly. "Lucas is my coworker. He calls you constantly. We work together. You smile at his messages more than our conversations." "That's not true." "It is." She stared at me with visible frustration. "What do you want me to do, Aaron?" I didn't answer immediately. That silence bothered her more than anger ever did. Finally, I spoke. "I want to stop feeling like a third person in my own relationship." For a second, guilt flashed across her face. Then pride returned. Without another word, Sophia grabbed her phone, opened her contacts, and aggressively deleted Lucas's number in front of me. "There." She threw the phone onto the table. "Happy now?" I looked at the screen. Deleted contact. But instead of relief, something inside me went cold. Because Tyler's words from months ago suddenly echoed in my head. People only make dramatic gestures when the truth already exists. I pushed my plate away. "I'm not hungry anymore." Sophia blinked. "That's it." "What do you mean?" "You accuse me all week. I delete the number, and now you're acting weird." I stood slowly. "I'm tired." "You don't believe me?" I grabbed my jacket from the chair. "I believe you deleted a phone number." "Aaron." "But I don't think that was ever the real problem." I walked toward the bedroom while she stared at me silently. That night, I barely slept. Not because of Lucas, because deep down, I already felt Sophia leaving me emotionally long before that dinner happened. The next morning, I woke up early and left for work before Sophia came out of the bedroom. I didn't leave my usual note beside the coffee machine. At the office, my friend Daniel noticed my mood immediately. "You look dead," he said while dropping into the chair beside my desk. I barely slept. "Relationship problems?" I laughed quietly. "When are they not?" Daniel studied me for a second. "You want to talk about it?" I hesitated. Then I finally admitted the truth aloud for the first time. "I think I'm losing her." He stayed quiet. That silence felt kinder than fake reassurance. Finally, he asked, "Do you think she's cheating?" "I don't know." I stared at my computer screen. "Honestly, I think this hurts because I'm not even sure anymore." Daniel leaned back slowly. "That uncertainty destroys people." "I know. You confronting her again tonight?" I shook my head. "No. I'm tired of begging someone to prove they care." Daniel nodded carefully. "Then stop begging." Simple advice. But it hit me harder than expected. That evening, I came home to find Sophia sitting on the couch, scrolling through her laptop. "You left early," she said carefully. "Yeah. You didn't text me today." "I was busy." She looked up immediately. Normally, I apologized after short answers like that. This time, I just walked into the kitchen and grabbed water. Sophia followed behind me. "Are you seriously still upset?" I opened the bottle slowly. "I'm thinking. About Lucas? About us." Her expression tightened slightly. "Aaron." "No, listen." I finally looked at her directly. "When was the last time we actually enjoyed being around each other?" "That's not fair." "It's honest. We've both been stressed." Stress doesn't explain emotional distance. She crossed her arms. "So now what? You think I'm secretly in love with him?" I stared at her quietly. That silence answered enough. Sophia looked hurt for the first time. "Wow." I didn't say anything. "You didn't have to." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The apartment suddenly felt colder than usual. Finally, she whispered, "You really think I do that to you?" I wanted to say no immediately. I wanted to protect her. Protect us. But something inside me stopped pretending. I said slowly, that people don't emotionally drift away overnight. Sophia looked like I slapped her. Aaron, I kept ignoring things because I loved you. That's unfair. Maybe. I shrugged tiredly. But I'm exhausted from feeling crazy every time I notice something wrong. Her eyes softened slightly then. For a second, she looked scared. Not angry. Scared. She stepped closer carefully. What happened to us? I laughed quietly under my breath. I've been asking myself that for months. She reached for my hand instinctively. I let her touch it, but I didn't hold hers back, and she noticed immediately. That was the moment everything changed. Sophia slowly pulled her hand away. You feel different. I looked at her for a long time before answering, because I finally realized I'm fighting for someone who already left me emotionally. The apartment became painfully quiet after our argument. Not peaceful, just empty. For the first few days, Sophia kept waiting for me to react the way I always did before. Normally, I asked questions. Normally, I checked her social media late at night, looking for clues I didn't want to find. Normally, I tried fixing every moment of distance between us. This time, I stopped. I muted her accounts. I stopped asking about Lucas. I stopped chasing reassurance from someone who clearly enjoyed watching me fight for it. And somehow, my silence affected Sophia more than every argument we ever had. One Saturday morning, she walked into the kitchen while I was making coffee. You're awake early, she said carefully. I started going to the gym again. She blinked. Since when? Last week. You didn't tell me. I shrugged lightly. Didn't think it mattered. That answer bothered her immediately. I saw it in her face. Later that afternoon, I met Chloe Parker downtown near the old bookstore we used to visit in college. Chloe smiled the second she saw me. There's the ghost, she joked while hugging me. I've been busy. No, she narrowed her eyes playfully. You've been emotionally destroyed. I laughed for the first time in days. Still brutally honest. Always. She handed me a coffee. So, tell me what's happening. We sat outside while people moved through the crowded street around us. For the first time in months, I admitted everything honestly. I don't think Sophia loves me the same way anymore. Chloe stayed quiet while listening. She keeps making me feel crazy for noticing obvious things, I continued. And honestly, I'm tired. You know what I think? Chloe asked. What? I think you disappeared inside that relationship. Her words hit harder than expected. She pointed at me gently. You stopped doing things you loved. You stopped seeing friends. You stopped taking care of yourself emotionally. Maybe. No, maybe. She smiled sadly. You made your entire life about keeping someone else happy. I stared down at my coffee silently. Chloe leaned back in her chair. Start rebuilding yourself. Ow! Old hobbies. New routines. Friends. Discipline. She shrugged. Stop making Sophia the center of your emotional universe. That conversation stayed inside my head for days afterward. So I listened. I returned to the gym consistently. I started reading again at night, instead of staring at Sophia's online activity. I stayed late at work focusing on projects instead of wondering who she was texting. And slowly, something strange happened. I started feeling like myself again. 2 weeks later, my manager called me into a conference room after I successfully led an important client presentation. You handled that project better than senior management expected, he admitted. Thank you. We're considering putting you in charge of the expansion campaign. For the first time in months, I felt genuine confidence instead of emotional exhaustion. That evening, I came home carrying takeout containers while Sophia sat on the couch scrolling through her phone. You're late, she said. Busy day. With work. Yeah. She studied me carefully. You seem happier lately. I placed the food on the counter. I'm trying to focus on productive things. Something about that answer made her uncomfortable. During dinner, she kept glancing at me strangely. Then finally she said casually, Lucas got promoted this week. I nodded while eating. Good for him. Sophia blinked. That's all. What else should I say? I don't know. She forced a laugh. Usually you ask a million questions. I drank water calmly. Not anymore. The silence that followed felt sharp. Sophia put her fork down slowly. You seriously don't care? I looked at her. About what? Lucas. I shrugged lightly. He's your coworker. That answer visibly unsettled her. Before, I reacted emotionally every time his name appeared. I hated hearing about him. Now, I sounded indifferent. And that terrified her. Later that night, I sat on the balcony answering emails when Tyler called me. How's everything, he asked. Quiet. That bad. I laughed softly. Actually, the opposite. Tyler immediately understood. You finally detached, emotionally. I think so. He stayed silent for a second before speaking carefully. You know, people rarely come back after that point, right? What do you mean? I mean, emotionally detached people usually don't reconnect easily. His voice lowered. Once they fully let go, that's normally the end. Those words sat heavily inside my chest. Because deep down, I knew he was right. I heard movement behind me. Sophia stood near the balcony doorway, holding a glass of water. Her expression looked tense. She definitely heard part of the conversation. Tyler kept talking through the phone. Do you still love her? I looked towards Sophia silently before answering. I don't know anymore. Her face changed instantly. Fear. Real fear. Not irritation. Not defensiveness. Fear. After I ended the call, Sophia remained standing there quietly. You're really thinking about leaving me? She asked softly. I leaned back in a chair. I've been thinking about a lot of things. That's not an answer. It's the truth. She stepped closer slowly. Aaron, we're just going through a rough phase. Maybe. No, maybe. Her voice cracked slightly. Couples struggle sometimes. I looked at her carefully. Struggling and emotionally abandoning someone aren't the same thing. She stared at me speechless. For months, she expected emotional fights. Jealousy. Begging. Instead, I gave her calm honesty. And somehow that affected her far more. Sophia sat down across from me quietly. You've changed. I had to. Why? I answered without hesitation. Because loving you started hurting more than losing you. That sentence completely broke the confidence in her eyes. For the first time since Lucas entered our lives, Sophia finally looked scared that I might truly walk away forever. The distance between Sophia and me kept growing quietly. Not through screaming. Not through dramatic fights. Just silence. And somehow that silence revealed more truth than arguments ever did. I started noticing patterns I ignored before. Every time Lucas's name came up, Sophia reacted instantly. Sometimes defensive. Sometimes nervous. Sometimes strangely protective. One evening, we were sitting in the living room while she answered emails on her laptop. Her phone buzzed against the couch cushion. Lucas Hayes. She grabbed the phone so quickly it almost fell from her hand. I noticed everything, but I said nothing. Sophia looked at me carefully. Why are you staring at me like that? I'm not. You are. I shrugged lightly. You seem stressed lately. Her expression tightened immediately. Work has been complicated. Because of Lucas? She snapped her laptop shut. Why does everything always come back to him? I looked at her calmly. Interesting reaction. That's not fair. Neither was making me feel crazy for months. She stood up frustrated. I'm going to bed. I watched her disappear down the hallway without trying to stop her. That was becoming a pattern too. Meanwhile, my own life slowly became calmer. I spent more time with Chloe, worked longer hours on projects I actually cared about, and stopped revolving my emotional world around Sophia's moods. One afternoon, Chloe met me outside my office, carrying iced coffee. You look healthier, she said immediately. That obvious? Yes. She smiled softly. You finally stopped emotionally starving yourself. I laughed quietly. That sounds dramatic. It's true. We sat together near the fountain outside the building while workers rushed through downtown streets around us. Then Chloe's expression shifted slightly. I heard something interesting from a mutual co-worker. My stomach tightened immediately. About Sophia? She nodded carefully. Lucas has apparently been using her connections to climb higher inside the company. I frowned. What do you mean? He got introduced to senior leadership through her. Chloe hesitated. And there are rumors he pushed her closer emotionally because it helped his promotion opportunities. I stared at her silently. For some reason, I expected satisfaction, vindication. Instead, I just felt tired. Told you, Chloe said gently. People like that chase advantage, not love. I rubbed my face slowly. Part of me thinks Sophia knows that already. Maybe. She just doesn't want to admit it. That evening, I came home to find Sophia sitting alone at the kitchen table in complete darkness, except for the light above the stove. You okay? I asked quietly. She looked exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. I had a terrible day, she whispered. I placed my bag down slowly. What happened? Nothing. She laughed bitterly. Everything. I sat across from her without speaking. After a long silence, she finally admitted, Lucas barely talks to me at work anymore. I stayed calm. Why? He says I've become emotionally distracting. The irony almost hurt. Sophia looked down at her hands. Do you know what the worst part is? I didn't answer. He talks to me now the same way I used to talk to you. That sentence sat heavily between us. For a second, I saw genuine self-awareness in her eyes. Not defensiveness. Not pride. Just pain. Rain tapped softly against the apartment windows while silence filled the kitchen. Then suddenly Sophia broke down crying. Not dramatically. Quietly. Like someone exhausted from carrying emotional weight too long. I don't even know why I kept hurting you, she whispered. Hearing that shattered something inside me. Because for the first time, she sounded honest. I leaned back slowly. Maybe you liked feeling wanted. Sophia wiped tears from her face. Maybe you thought I'd never leave emotionally. Her breathing shook slightly. I think I believed you'd always stay no matter what. I looked at her carefully. Part of me still loved her. That was the painful truth. But another part of me remembered every night I questioned my own worth because of her emotional games. Before I could respond, headlights flashed outside the apartment window. A loud knock followed seconds later. Sophia froze instantly. Another knock. Harder this time. Then Lucas's voice echoed from outside the building entrance. Sophia, open the door. Her face drained of color. I stood slowly and walked toward the window. Lucas stood outside in the rain, looking furious. Talk to me, he shouted upward. Sophia remained frozen near the kitchen table. You should go downstairs, I said quietly. She looked at me immediately. No. That answer surprised both of us. Lucas knocked again downstairs. Sophia. She shook her head firmly. I'm not going. I studied her carefully. For months, she defended him endlessly. Now she looked terrified at him instead. Tyler called me later that night, after Sophia finally went to bed. I told him everything. He listened quietly before saying, sometimes people only realize your value when someone else starts destroying theirs. I stared out the balcony window toward the rain-covered streets below. Maybe. No, Tyler continued. You gave Sophia peace. Lucas gave her excitement. He paused briefly. Now she's learning excitement without loyalty becomes chaos. Those words stayed in my mind long after the call ended. 3 days later, I started packing for a week-long business trip in Chicago after my company assigned me to lead an important expansion meeting. Sophia stood silently near the bedroom doorway, watching me fold shirts into my suitcase. You'll only be gone a week? She asked carefully. Probably. It depends how meetings go. She looked down quietly, then finally whispered, It feels like you're already leaving me emotionally. I stopped packing for a moment, but I didn't know how to comfort her anymore, because deep down, I feared she might finally be right. Chicago gave me something I hadn't felt in months. Silence. Real silence. No tension hiding behind fake smiles. No late-night arguments. No constant wondering whether the woman I loved still respected me emotionally. My hotel room overlooked the city skyline, glowing silver beneath cold rain and traffic lights. Every night after meetings ended, I sat near the window thinking about everything that happened between Sophia and me. And, slowly, something painful became impossible to ignore. Lucas was never the only reason our relationship broke. The deeper problem was what I became while loving her. Anxious, exhausted, emotionally small. One evening after a client dinner, Chloe called me while I walked back toward the hotel. How's Chicago? She asked. Busy. That bad. I laughed quietly. Actually peaceful. That says a lot. I crossed the empty street slowly while cold wind moved through downtown buildings. I keep replaying everything in my head. And I think I lost myself trying to keep Sophia happy. Chloe stayed silent for a second. Then she said softly, "Love without peace eventually becomes survival." That sentence stopped me completely. Cars moved through rain beside me while I stood frozen on the sidewalk. Survival. That was exactly what our relationship felt like near the end. Not partnership, not comfort, just emotional survival. Later that night, Sophia called again. The seventh missed call that day. This time I answered. "Hey," I said quietly. Her voice sounded shaky immediately. "You finally picked up. I've been busy. You barely text me anymore. I told you meetings were nonstop." Silence filled the line briefly. Then she whispered, "I miss you." I closed my eyes tiredly. Months ago, hearing that would have healed me instantly. Now it only made me sad. "I should sleep," I replied calmly. "Aaron, wait." "Good night, Sophia." I ended the call before she could continue. The next morning, dozens of unread texts waited on my phone. "Can we please talk honestly? I know things are bad. I feel like you're disappearing from me. Please don't shut me out completely." I stared at the screen for a long time before finally typing a short response. "We'll talk when I get home." Nothing more. When my flight landed 3 days later, exhaustion sat heavily inside my chest. Not physical exhaustion, emotional exhaustion. The apartment lights were on when I walked inside. Sophia stood near the kitchen wearing one of my old hoodies. Her eyes immediately filled with tears the second she saw me. "You're home," she whispered. "Yeah." She stepped closer carefully. "Can we talk now?" I placed my suitcase near the doorway. "Okay." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then suddenly she broke emotionally. "I know things got toxic between us," she said through tears. "I know I messed up with Lucas and everything else, but please stop looking at me like I'm a stranger." I stayed quiet. That silence made her cry harder. "Aaron, please say something." I finally looked at her directly. "Do you really want honesty?" "Yes." "Completely honest?" She nodded weakly. I took a slow breath before speaking. This relationship didn't break because of Lucas alone. Sophia looked confused immediately. "What do you mean?" "It broke because every time I felt hurt, you treated my emotions like an inconvenience." Her face went still. I continued quietly. "Every time I tried communicating honestly, you called me insecure. Every time I felt uncomfortable, you made me feel dramatic instead of valued." "That's not." "It is." My voice remained calm. "You stopped protecting my feelings a long time ago." Tears rolled down her face silently now. I wasn't angry anymore. That somehow made the conversation worse. "You know what destroyed me the most?" I asked softly. She shook her head. I started questioning my own reality. I laughed bitterly. I kept thinking maybe I really was crazy for noticing obvious emotional distance. Sophia covered her mouth while crying. I continued anyway because she needed to hear the truth. "You made me compete for reassurance inside my own relationship. I never wanted that. But you enjoyed being chased." I looked at her sadly, and eventually I got tired. The apartment became painfully quiet. Finally, Sophia whispered, "I didn't realize how much damage I caused." "I know. That's the worst part." She wiped tears from her face desperately. "I genuinely thought we were just struggling like normal couples." I shook my head slowly. Normal relationships don't make people feel emotionally worthless. That sentence shattered her completely. Sophia sat down at the kitchen table while crying quietly into her hands. For the first time since I met her, she wasn't defending herself. She wasn't blaming Lucas. She wasn't accusing me of insecurity. She finally understood. "I neglected you emotionally," she admitted weakly. I stayed silent. "And somehow," she looked up at me through tears, "I still expected unconditional loyalty from you." Hearing her say it aloud hurt more than I expected. Because she was right. I walked toward the bedroom slowly. Sophia looked up immediately. "What are you doing?" "Packing some things." Fear spread across her face instantly. "Aaron, I already signed a lease while I was in Chicago." She froze completely. "You're leaving?" "I think I need space to breathe again." Her crying became heavier after that. Not dramatic, not manipulative, just heartbreak. I packed quietly while she sat motionless at the kitchen table. Every folded shirt felt like another piece of our relationship ending permanently. When I finally carried my suitcase toward the front door, Sophia stood shakily. "Please don't do this," she whispered. I looked at her for a long moment. Part of me wanted to stay. Part of me still loved her deeply. But love without peace had already destroyed too much inside me. "I hope you heal someday," I said softly. Then I walked out. An hour later, I sat alone inside my new apartment, surrounded by unopened boxes and silence. Meanwhile, somewhere across the city, Sophia cried alone in the kitchen of the home we once shared together. Rain hammered against my apartment windows the night Sophia showed up again. I opened the door slowly and found her standing there soaked from head to toe. Her hair clung to her face. Her hands trembled around the strap of her purse. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, "Can I come in?" I stepped aside silently. Sophia walked into the apartment carefully, almost like she no longer believed she belonged anywhere near me. The soft lamp beside my couch lit up the dark room, while thunder echoed outside. "You still hate storms," I said quietly. She gave a weak smile. "You remembered that?" "I remember a lot of things." That answer hurt both of us. I walked toward the kitchen and handed her a towel. She held it tightly, but kept staring at me with exhausted eyes. "You look different," she said. "So do you." "I mean it." Her voice cracked slightly. "You look lighter." I leaned against the counter. "Turns out peace helps." She lowered her eyes immediately. The silence between us felt heavier than before. Months ago, we would have argued by now. She would accuse me of being dramatic. I would demand answers she never wanted to give. Now we just looked tired. Sophia sat carefully on the edge of the couch. "Tyler told me you got promoted again. He talks too much. He worries about you." "I know." She nodded slowly. "Chloe too." At the mention of Chloe, something flickered across her face. Not anger, regret. "I used to think Chloe was trying to steal you from me," she admitted quietly. I crossed my arms. "She wasn't. I know that now." Outside, rainwater streaked across the glass while headlights moved through the street below. The apartment felt calm. That calmness scared her. Sophia looked around slowly. "You built a whole new life here." "I had to." "You moved on fast." I shook my head. "No." I healed slowly. That sentence made her eyes water instantly. She pressed her lips together before whispering, "Lucas left the company." I heard. He blamed me for everything after the promotion situation failed. She laughed bitterly. "Funny, right?" I stayed silent. Sophia rubbed her hands together nervously. I kept thinking if I deleted his number that night, everything would magically go back to normal. But it didn't. No, tears slid down her face quietly. Because the real problem wasn't Lucas. I looked at her carefully. For months, I had imagined this conversation. Back then, I wanted apologies. I wanted explanations. Now I mostly felt tired. Sophia looked down at the floor. "I treated your feelings like interruptions." Her voice shook harder. "Every time you tried telling me you were hurting, I acted annoyed instead of listening. I remembered every dinner ruined by cold replies. Every argument where I ended up apologizing for reacting emotionally. Every night, I questioned myself instead of questioning the obvious distance growing between us. You made me feel embarrassing for caring," I said quietly. She closed her eyes. "I know." "No, Sophia. I don't think you understood before." My chest tightened slightly. I wasn't upset because of Lucas alone. I was exhausted because the person I loved kept making me feel small for having emotions. Her breathing became uneven. "I know," she repeated weakly. I looked toward the rain-covered windows. "When someone loves you," I continued softly, "they shouldn't make you feel guilty for wanting reassurance." Sophia broke down completely after hearing that. "I'm sorry," she whispered through tears. "God, I'm so sorry." Part of me wanted to comfort her automatically. That old instinct still existed somewhere inside me. But I stayed where I was. Not because I hated her, because I finally understood the difference between love and self-destruction. Sophia wiped her face shakily. "After you left, everything became quiet. I said nothing. No calls. No messages. No one checking if I got home safe." She laughed painfully. "I used to think you were too emotional. Then suddenly nobody cared enough to ask about me at all." I looked at her carefully. And that hurt. It destroyed me. Thunder echoed outside again. Sophia stared at me with red eyes. I finally understood what abandonment feels like. Her honesty hurt more than manipulation ever could, because this version of her was real. Too late, but real. I never wanted revenge, I admitted quietly. I know, I just wanted peace. She nodded slowly, and I took that away from you. The room fell silent again. After a long moment, Sophia reached into her purse and pulled out a small silver key. My old apartment key. She placed it carefully on the coffee table. I kept thinking maybe you'd come back one day, she whispered. I stared at the key for several seconds. Then I pushed it gently back toward her. I already came back too many times. That sentence shattered the last bit of hope inside her eyes. Sophia covered her mouth quietly as tears rolled down her face again. I hated seeing her cry, but I hated who I became while begging for love even more. Finally, she stood slowly from the couch. I think part of me always believed you would stay no matter how badly I treated you. I looked at her calmly. That version of me doesn't exist anymore. She nodded like she expected that answer. At the door, Sophia stopped one last time without turning around. I really did love you, she whispered. I swallowed hard before answering. I know, but love without care eventually turns into damage. Her shoulders shook silently. Then she opened the door and stepped back into the storm alone. I stood there for a long time after she disappeared down the hallway. The apartment stayed quiet. But for the first time in years, the silence no longer hurt me. Almost a year passed before I saw Sophia again. By then, my life barely resembled the version that once revolved around saving a relationship. I received a major promotion at work 3 months earlier. My apartment finally felt like home instead of a temporary escape. I slept peacefully again. Most importantly, I stopped measuring my worth through someone else's attention. Chloe stayed beside me through every difficult stage after the separation. She never rushed me emotionally, never pressured me into becoming someone new overnight. One evening while we cooked dinner together, she smiled and said, "You laugh differently now." I looked up from cutting vegetables. "What does that mean?" "It sounds lighter." She shrugged playfully. "Before, even your happiness sounded exhausted." I laughed quietly. "That's painfully accurate." She walked closer and nudged my shoulder gently. "You survived something emotionally heavy, Aaron. I know, and you finally stopped carrying it alone." That mattered more than she realized. My relationship with Chloe developed slowly. Naturally. No games. No emotional confusion. Just honesty and patience. For the first time in years, love didn't feel like survival. It felt peaceful. One cold afternoon after a meeting downtown, I stopped at a quiet cafe near the river to escape the rain outside. The soft sound of jazz filled the room, while people worked silently on laptops beneath warm yellow lights. I almost didn't recognize Sophia at first. She sat alone near the back window, holding a coffee cup between both hands. Her hair was shorter now. Her face looked softer somehow. Not happier, just quieter, emotionally older. The moment her eyes met mine, surprise crossed her expression instantly. "Aaron," she whispered. I hesitated briefly before walking over. "Hey." She looked nervous suddenly. "I didn't expect to see you here." Neither did I. For a second, neither of us knew what to say. Then she gestured toward the empty chair across from her. "Do you want to sit?" Part of me expected old emotions to rush back immediately. Anger, sadness, bitterness. Instead, I just felt calm. So I sat down. Rain tapped softly against the cafe windows while silence settled between us. But unlike before, this silence didn't feel toxic. It felt honest. Sophia studied me carefully. "You look good." "So do you." She smiled faintly. "That's generous." I leaned back slightly. "How have you been?" "Better than before." She stared down at her coffee. "Still figuring things out." I nodded slowly. "And you?" she asked. "I'm good. I heard about your promotion." Tyler talks too much. That made her laugh softly for the first time. Then her expression became serious again. "I owe you another apology," she said quietly. "You already apologized." "Not properly." I stayed silent. Sophia took a slow breath. For a long time, I confused attention with love. I looked at her carefully. She continued softly. "I liked feeling wanted. I liked emotional chasing. Validation became addictive to me. Her eyes lowered, and I didn't realize how badly that was hurting you until everything collapsed. Hearing those words a year ago would have destroyed me emotionally. Now they just sounded sad. I genuinely loved you, she whispered, but I was emotionally selfish. I looked out the cafe window briefly while traffic lights reflected across the wet streets outside. You know what the hardest part was for me? I admitted quietly. She shook her head, feeling guilty for having emotions. Sophia closed her eyes immediately. I know. No, I said calmly. I really believed I was the problem sometimes. Tears filled her eyes slowly. You made me question my own instincts because I loved you so much. I know, she repeated weakly. The old version of me would have wanted her to suffer hearing that truth. Now I just wanted honesty. And finally, after everything, we had it. Sophia wiped at her eyes carefully. After you left, I started therapy. That surprised me slightly. It forced me to face parts of myself I kept avoiding. She laughed bitterly. Turns out emotional validation isn't the same thing as emotional connection. I nodded slowly. I wish I understood that earlier. So do I. Another silence followed, but this one felt lighter somehow. Not unresolved. Finished. Sophia looked at me carefully across the table. Are you happy now? I thought about Chloe. About peaceful mornings without anxiety. About rebuilding confidence I thought I permanently lost. Yes, I answered honestly. I am. Tears rolled down her face again after hearing that. Not because she wanted to manipulate me, because she finally understood what we could have been if she valued us properly from the beginning. She laughed shakily while wiping her cheeks. I spent so much time terrified of losing attention that I destroyed the person who genuinely loved me. I didn't deny it. There was no point anymore. After a long moment, Sophia finally asked the question sitting between us all afternoon. Did you ever stop loving me? The cafe suddenly felt very quiet. I looked at her for several seconds before answering truthfully. No. Hope flickered across her face for half a second. Then I continued softly. I just finally started loving myself too. That completely shattered her. Sophia covered her mouth while tears streamed silently down her face. Not dramatic, not loud, just heartbreak finally meeting truth. I stood slowly from the table and placed enough cash beside my untouched coffee. Sophia looked up at me desperately through tears, but neither of us had anything left to say anymore. Because closure doesn't always arrive through revenge. Sometimes it arrives through peace. I walked toward the cafe door while rain continued falling softly outside. And for the first time in years, I left without carrying sadness behind me.